Hi, I'm Old Norse Specialist Jackson Crawford. My old mic doesn't work with my phone anymore. The new one I tried to replace it with doesn't seem to be working either. So I thought, well, it's so windy that it's hard to do my regular videos anyway. And now and then on Patreon, I get requests to do another ranch porch video, which I thought would be a pretty good idea for these super windy micless days. In my ranch porch videos, I essentially rant on ranch porch about something that might or might not have to do with, information about Norse myth or language. I rant in plenty of videos, of course, but from what I've heard on Patreon, it seems like people tolerate my rants best in these designated rant zones. So that's what you're going to get today, a designated rant zone. In other words, a ranch porch series video. All right, so my designated rant for today is the difference between people saying you're wrong and I'm right. And this seems simpler than the exact point that I really mean to make, which is, all right, people tell me all the time that I'm wrong. And sometimes I am, right? Believe me, it has been known to happen that I am wrong. I have a PhD in Old Norse language and literature. My freaking career is defined by a really bad decision. So, I'm not some hero of brilliance and good decision making. And naturally, I do get things wrong. I mean, a simple example is, and this will also kind of demonstrate the levels of wrong, is just in the process of translation, right? So for example, I've been reading Old Norse since 2003. So in those 19 years of reading Old Norse constantly, literally doing it for a living on one level or another, as an instructor in the language or in translating works from the language or what have you, I would say that if you show me a simple prose text in Old Norse, your basic saga or something like that, I could read that, tell you what it says, and, let's say, I don't think after 19 years it's bragging to say that probably 98% of that will be, pretty unimpeachable, right? There might be an unfamiliar word, an unfamiliar idiom here or there where you could catch me, especially if I'm not using, resources like the ONP dictionary or something like that. I'm just doing it on the fly. Say, well, you didn't get this exactly right. Okay, fine, right? Like I know that I might not. I know that someone with more experience, or perhaps a native speaker of modern Icelandic who has a little bit more of an ear for some of the idioms, even in Old Icelandic, might pick up on things that I'm not going to pick up on. So that's a simple level of error that's easy to accept. But obviously, I think there's a pretty high threshold for error there. I don't think that I'm going to make a lot of errors. Then you have another level that's perhaps here is a complicated skaldic poem, right? So there's a lot of weird word choices and poetic kennings in order to fit into the complicated meter. And on top of that, it's preserved in a jumbled manuscript tradition where even the medieval copyists didn't fully understand it, so they wrote some of the wrong words. You show that to me, again, let's say without resources, just looking at it cold, there might be more like a 75% success rate there. I don't know what this word is, and I'm having a hard time figuring out whether it's an error or just a word that I've never seen, or part of a really unfamiliar kenning, although of course there's patterns of kennings that you come to pick up after this long of reading Old Norse. Something that, by the way, Taryn Wills from the ONP is going to come back Patreon to talk to us about. That'll be a good interview. All right, so there's different levels of confidence there, and if I offer you a translation of a skaldic poem that I did on the fly, something like this, especially with a really jumbled tradition, and you tell me, oh well, you got this wrong and this wrong. Sure, yeah, okay. All right. I don't have a problem, even within my field of expertise, with someone pointing out, here is a mistake, right? That's fine. I know that I make them. Everyone does. And that's kind of the other point of this video, is there's a huge difference between you saying, well, you got this wrong, and therefore, because this really happens in some people's heads, and therefore, X who says something different is right. Well, X is not necessarily right, right? If you can point out some place where I mistranslated something, and sure, that's happened even in published works, right? We've made small changes in printings of the Poetic Edda, for example, since the first printing in 2015, to reflect small corrections. There will probably eventually be a second edition of the Poetic Edda translation where, I'll presumably make a few changes. You can see changes between especially the Havamal translation and the Poetic Edda from 2015 and the Wanderers Havamal from 2019, where I rethought something, or because I had the commentary in the back in the Wanderers Havamal, I felt like I could change something and talk about it in the commentary. It happens, right? It's a process. No one ever perfectly learns a language. I certainly haven't perfectly learned English, let alone Old Norse or Icelandic or Norwegian. What was I getting at? Okay, but what happens sometimes is you see someone say, well, you got, this word wrong here or something, and this guy pointed it out, and, therefore I trust what he says more than you, and I just don't understand this leap. X person could have some really good qualifications, could be a very experienced student of Old Norse. But more often this is used as an argument for, these gurus who make weird claims about what the Edda really says, or a poem in the Poetic Edda really says, like this is an allegory for this or that, or this says something that, it supports my position about X, Y, or Z that you don't read out of it. Well, no, right? Even if you point out again that I said something totally wrong, it doesn't mean that by catching my error, you are error-free, right? I see this in my own family sometimes with really badly matched couples where, the husband says the sky is blue, and maybe he's not a great guy, but the wife, who is maybe a nicer person, says, well, the sky is in fact green, and he's right. That doesn't mean that I like him, but I can agree with him on this statement or other statement. You use your own critical faculties and consider, this goes way beyond just, me talking about Old Norse on YouTube. Whether someone is using fault finding with other people, and I would say especially with other people who don't pretend to have, direct channels to the gods or something, right? I'm not sitting here telling you, well, Odin told me this, I'm the conduit or the avatar, whatever, of a god, or I'm a prophet or something like that, right? I'm trying. Let me tell you a really big difference, I think, between me and those people. And again, this isn't me saying that I'm the king in the mountain or something, but there's a huge difference between the attitude, I'm talking to people who don't know what I know, and therefore I can manipulate them, right? Therefore I can put something over on them, right? A big difference between someone who says, well, they don't know what X text says. One thing that I've learned is that even with a very short text like half a mile, people who claim to like it or even love it haven't necessarily read it. And I'm sure that a lot of these gurus know that too, and feel like, well, I can kind of, say it says whatever I want. Or of course, anything goes with someone who says, well, the gods talk to me. Because who can call that person on it? And I think, there's I sometimes sort of jokingly call it to myself, clinical confidence, where people just project this huge confidence, and it kind of takes different forms in men and women, but it gets a similar response from people where it's just like, oh, this person, really knows, because look how confident he or she is. And I think sometimes I don't project that confidence. Well, I mean, I know I don't project a ton of confidence anyway, and that goes back to, being the lowest rung of the social ladder in high school and all that stuff that was probably not easily recovered from. But also because I know that I can be wrong about things, right? I go back and cringe sometimes, realizing that I got something wrong, and I've remade videos because I said something really stupid in them or something like that. But these people will often project that huge confidence, and also, okay, what I was getting at is these are people who look at someone who doesn't know something they know and say, well, I can put something over on that person, or I can manipulate that person. My attitude, and you can, by the way, come to extremely different conclusions from mine and yet share this attitude, is here's people who don't know something I know. That means we have spent time learning different things. And if they are interested in learning something I know, what can I do to bring them to know what I know and understand it how I understand it? Starting with basic facts that we can pretty much agree on, right? This is part of the sense behind my readings of the Poetic Edda in Old Norse on this channel. We go through some poem in Old Norse, reading it word by word, telling you what the words say, as neutrally and objectively as I can, so you can draw your own conclusions about whether, I've interpreted it right or wrong. But if we can start at the base agreement of, here's the text, right? It's in one manuscript, or maybe two, or like 2.5 if you're talking about Voluspout. Let's agree on just what it says, and then we can talk about what that means or whatever. But I want you to be able to build that tower of understanding yourself, and I don't want you to accept things from me on faith, right? I don't know what I would try to get you to accept from me on faith, but it's not my mission here. I'm not a guru, and I'm not trying to be, and as much fun as it can be to point out, oh, someone's stupid, he got something wrong. As long as you're getting things wrong in the right spirit, right? As long as you're accepting that, well, it's a constant quest for learning and knowledge. It's never done, and no one ever fully, knows the answers to everything, not even about a small subject area. That's fine, That's the whole purpose of scholarship, as classically understood, is people investigating hypotheses and getting data that supports or doesn't support them, and open discussion about what the data really say vis-a-vis whatever hypothesis. I'll give you another analogy from outside of this field, and then I'll shut up. I'm glad this is a designated rant video, because it has been such a disorganized rant. If you ask me, where is the planet in the universe with the intelligent life that's most like humankind? It's kind of a meaningless question to me, right? But maybe I claim to know something about this, and I tell you, it's 5,600 light years away, or whatever. It's also a meaningless answer. It's based on nothing. I have no particular knowledge about astronomy. Who cares what I say about it? All right. If you ask an astronomer, Where is the planet in the universe with the type of intelligent life that's the most like humankind? There's also not an objective answer. I don't think anyone knows that. I don't know how you would, but the astronomer can at least give you data, right? Well, we know that there are exoplanets, of X or Y climate type or distance from their sun, or, containing whatever elements or something like that. They can give you an answer that at least, if it's not giving you the exact datum that you want, as data that's relevant to it. Often I find myself in that latter position in questions about, like especially Norse mythology, where, years ago, back before my assistant's fellow was answering my public emails and I had to wade through all this stuff all the time on my own, I remember there was this guy who was really, really angry at me and was sending me email all the time. Starting off with what he was asking was, who is Þjóðreirir? Þjóðreirir is a dwarf who's mentioned in the last part of Havamal, who, it's just, he's a name, right? There's nothing about him. The name never occurs anywhere else. It's hard to even say what the name would mean. People read or something like that. Like, who the hell knows? And maybe there never was a story about who this was. It's just a name that gets thrown in by the poet there. So it starts off as a question: who is this guy? What can you tell me about him? And my initial response is, well, there's nothing more to tell you about him than the fact that, the name occurs here. The elements could mean this. It seems to be chosen for alliterating reasons, something like that. But because I didn't have an answer beyond that, because I couldn't say, well, here's 20 pages about his life story, the guy gets mad at me, right? And I couldn't tell if he thought that I was hiding something initially, or if I was just, ignorant, and how the hell can you call yourself an expert in this field if you don't know the answers to these things? But I feel like that's kind of like me turning to the astronomer and saying, how the hell do you call yourself an expert in this if you know something that no human could possibly know? But eventually, of course, it turned from, I'm mad at you for hiding something or not knowing something, to just like straight up, well, you don't know it, so you're just an idiot. I think about this sometimes because I have a huge emphasis in this channel and in my presentation generally about what we can't know, right? I, again, want to share with you data that you can form your own interpretations and such about. And I just don't feel like I'll offer you a speculation now and then, right? Sometimes something that I feel 67% confident about, like I think that my idea about, if you look for my videos, it's called The Death of Baldur, or I guess for the Great Courses class in Norse myth that I helped on, I talked about how the story of Baldur's death looks to me like a combination of a Finnic myth related to the Lemminkainen myth that's in the Kalevala, a combination of that and a story about a brother killing a brother in Beowulf. I'm 67% confident that I'm pretty close to the origin of the Baldur's death story there. But you could prove to me that, it has nothing to do with one of those somehow, or that I have something wrong about the source questions, or especially that I've made errors on the edges there. Now and then I'll also mention something where, it's just a pure thought. It's like, maybe, like I've mentioned that, maybe Heimdallr is Ullr, right? Ullr being this god who's barely ever mentioned, but has a couple things where he kind of seems to shade into Heimdallr for me. If somebody proved to me that that was wrong, I don't know how you prove it was right or wrong, I would say, yeah, sure. I mean, I was just throwing it out there. I'm not saying this is, a huge tenet that I hold to with great confidence. But I try not to speculate way too much with you, because there's so much information out there that if we're patient with, we can learn to master and also learn to interrogate more deeply and maybe add to our knowledge and, help other people add to theirs, whatever subject that we're interested in. Well, that's enough of this. I didn't intend for this to go almost 20 minutes. But next time somebody says, you're wrong and therefore I'm right, cut that and therefore out and ask independently, is that person right even though that person is wrong? Very, very much not necessarily true. All right. Thank you, Patreon, so much for your support that allows this channel to keep going. And to everyone out there from beautiful Colorado, I'm wishing you